Hi everyone, today we hopped into a tournament. I'll get into the details later. I gotta catch this hand first because I started recording late. Basically, I bet 3 times the big blind pre-flop, got one caller. Now I'm continuation betting with ace king, and that's the flop. That's the turn. I was kind of hoping he'd fold. I still have decent equity, but I'm just gonna check it back and probably call whatever he bets. So let's see that. And actually, he goes all in, so I'm not super. I don't really think he has a queen, but it's too early in the tournament, so I'm just gonna fold. So this is the next hand. I have king 6 off in the big blind, not the best holding, but I'm just going to take a moment to explain how this works. So basically, I'm pretty experienced in poker. I'm not the best, but I've played a lot with friends, and I've played a lot online. I've played over 5,000 hands of cash games for real money. And this again this is for real money. It's a $1 buy-in. It's a 27-person tournament, so it's actually a sit and go, and the first person gets just under $10 and the top 5 cash. And we've just started. So here I checked in the big blind, pretty standard. Obviously here I'm going to check again or fold to a bet because it's a pretty bad flop for us. There's a lot of draws. It's a very draw heavy board, and there's no guarantee that our king is good. So the action actually checks through, and we see a king on the turn, which is an excellent card for us. Obviously the draws are still there, so I really should have bet here. I made a terrible mistake by checking, thinking that someone else would raise. But obviously 9s and 8s, anyone with a pair of 9s or 8s would have bet the flop. And so now we see one of the bad cards. There are a lot of bad cards, that's why I should have bet, come on the turn. The 10s, that means some straights get there. And we see a huge lead from the first guy. This is really unfortunate. I don't think we can fold with top pair here. So I just go ahead and make the call. It's a really unusually sized bet, but I don't think I can ever fold. And the guy shows us the lowest straight, and he gets us. But still a pretty weird bet sizing. So this hand is actually much later. We're in the big blind again with 7-6 suited. So we have 2 callers, and the small blind doesn't seem to be there, so he folds. And so we're not looking to make a huge pot here, so we're just going to check it. And flop's not great for us. Obviously we hit a pair, but they could easily be hitting an ace or a jack, or could have a higher pocket pair or a flush draw. So we're just going to fold this bet. Since we're all so early in the tournament, I don't think bluffing big is a good idea. We're going to play it pretty tight, pretty straightforward. So in the small blind now we pick up kings, which is a fantastic holding. So obviously we're hoping that someone raises so we can 3-bet them. So we have one person who raised 2 times the big blind. So obviously we're going to 3-bet them. I'm going to bet about 3 times their raise. So obviously we're hoping they're going to call. One person's all in here with 20 chips. So even if they fold, we get a good amount of them. But they call, and so we see this flop. It's a really wet board. We have spades, we have straight draws, so we're obviously going to be betting here all the time. We don't want to see an ace either. And they fold. And so now we're kind of flipping, not really, and we take it down. So a few hands later, we're in the big blind with Jack 7 offsuit. Here we're just going to be looking for no raises to just check, otherwise we're going to fold. And we're going to try to see a flop, and if the flop's not favorable, then we're also going to fold. So a bunch of people flat. We can check, see a free flop. Not very good. We're probably going to be folding this one. So the next hand, we're in the small blind. We have 3-2 offsuit, which is obviously not very good. We're probably going to be looking to fold this one if anyone raises. If someone calls, we can probably flat. But actually, it gets folded all the way to us. So what we're going to do here is we're going to try to bully the big blind. So we're going to raise it up to 2.5, maybe 3 big blinds. I think we're going to do 2.5 here. Trying to make him fold a not so great hand, which is probably what he's holding here. But he actually shoves over us. We can't call, even if he has a pretty mediocre hand, because our hand is just always worse. So we have to fold that one out. So the next hand, we're on the button with Jack 9 suited, which is pretty decent. If someone opens, we're going to have to decide what to do. But actually, it folds to us, so we're going to try the same strategy again. Maybe that guy picked up a good hand. We don't really know. So I'm going to go ahead and raise it up, try to get both these guys to fold. The big blind's pretty tight, so he's going to be folding really often. So this guy actually raises, so he's doing kind of the same thing as last hand. It's very possible he has a really good hand here, but we're already not super high on chips, and we really want to cash in this. So we kind of have to take a few risks. So we're going to shove. Try to get those dead chips in the middle. He actually calls, and he calls with a not so great hand, king 3, but it's still better than ours because our flush is dominated. But we run it, the board runs out really well, and we actually pick that one up for a nice size pot. Alright, so just two hands later, we pick up queens in late position, which is obviously a fantastic hand. We're going to be looking to raise it up if it folds to us, or we're going to be 3-betting any raisers. Obviously, we'd be delighted if anyone shoved all in right here, but that's kind of unlikely because we're pretty deep. So we're going to be, this guy just flatted, so we're going to be making this raise a little bit bigger because there's a little bit more dead money in the pot. I think 3 big blinds is pretty decent. You could argue to make it a little bit more, but getting a caller is not bad since our hand's very good. So the big blind calls, the guy in front of us is getting a great price to call, so he goes ahead and calls, and we see a pretty terrible flop. It's very dry. We're in position, but this guy makes a pot-sized bet, and we're kind of worried because he was the one who called in the big blind, so he probably has a decent hand. We don't want to call. We have very few outs here. Calling is putting a lot of money in the pot. The chance that at least one of these guys had an ace is very high. So we're going to go ahead here, and we're going to make the fold, which is very sad, but I think that's the right decision. And the guy actually decides to show us his hand, and he shows us an ace of spades. So if we're results oriented, it was a great fold, but I'll be looking at it later. A few hands later, we're in the big blind again, this time with 4-3 suited, which is a little bit better, and we see a shove in front of us, which would generally be not good. But this guy actually has a really short stack, and obviously if someone in front of us calls or reshoves, we're probably going to be, well, actually, we have pretty good equity in multi-way parts, so unless someone shoved in front of us, we're probably calling. And yeah, so now this guy shoved in front of us, so we're going to be folding. But otherwise, if it had folded to us, we probably would have called, getting a great price with a not terrible hand in all-in situations. So we're going to unfold this one, but we're going to watch this play out. So yeah, 2 pocket pairs. Turns out if we'd made the call for the all-in, we actually would have won. So we're a little sad that guy shoved, but whatever. So a little bit later, we pick up pocket 5s in late position, which is obviously a great holding. We have a couple options here. It really depends on what the guys before us do, but they fold. So we could either call, we could raise it up, or we could jam all in. I'm not sure about raising it up because I don't want to get raised all in because I feel like these guys are pretty tight and they'd raise better than me and we'd be flipping at best. So I didn't want to do that. I just go in ahead and flatted and I hoped to flop a set, which I did not do. But this is still a really dry board, so it's not absolutely terrible. We check it back because we don't see reason to raise. We think that he might check a king, and so we're a little worried. 8's pretty good because it means he probably doesn't have an 8. He's definitely not checking king twice, so we think we have the best hand here with 5. So we're going to put a little value bet in. We're going to charge him to see a river because we don't want him to hit something on the river, and he ends up in folds, which is obviously a good result for us. So a few hands later, we're in late position. My internet was not doing super hot, and my computer was being a little laggy, but we just see that we picked up ace 10. The guys before us both fold, so we think raising here is pretty good. We're going to have one of the best hands. We don't mind getting called. We have pretty good equity in an all-in situation, but it looks like we might get walked here. And yeah, everyone folds. So we take it down. Not the worst result. So I'm showing you guys all the hands that I played where some sort of chips were exchanged. Some are a little bit more interesting than others, but I think it's going to give you guys a good idea of what's going on. So in this hand, the player on the button decides to go all in, and we can't call with this hand, so we just fold. So the next hand, we pick up 6-4 offsuit in the small blind. As you can see, 2 guys just joined our table. That's because we're down to 18 people in the tournament. So they just joined, but they're not going to be playing this. So it's just me in the big blind. So I'm really considering raising, trying to bully the big blind out of his 150 chips. But there's already so many chips in the middle that I think he's just going to shove if I raise him. If he has anything halfway decent. And 6-4 suited, offsuit, I mean, is pretty bad. So we're just going to call and hope for to see a flop. So we do see a flop. It's pretty low. It's not great for our range, but it's not great for his range because we just flatted. And so we're going to go ahead and put a small continuation bet because the board's pretty interesting. We actually do have a gut shot straight draw. And my logic behind this is that if he didn't hit the flop at all, he's not going to want to commit any more of his stack. And so he goes ahead and folds. So I was getting pretty bad cards, so I'm in the big blind again. Some guy 3-bet. This guy's never 3-bet before, so this looks really strong to me. and I'm not getting a bad price to call. But if I miss the flop, I'm gonna fold anyway, because I feel like he'd continue. So I just go ahead and fold it. So right as I say, I'm not getting many good cards. I pick up pocket nines in the small blind. I'm gonna see what happens before me, before deciding what to do. So you have one guy just flat, a couple other guys fold, and this guy flats as well. So there's so much dead money in the pot. And pocket nines don't play super well post flop, especially in this big of a pot. It's a really easy shove for me. Someone calls, I might even be dominating them a little bit. So there's just a great shove. Also, I really expected this guy to call because he committed so much of his stack. So yeah, he does call with pocket fives. So we're way ahead, and we hold. So good amount of chips coming our way. So a bit later, here the big blind is 200 chips. So a lot of people here are pretty short stacked. They're under 10 big blinds. They're going to be shoving pretty often. Obviously here I'm hoping for a shove because I have ace king off in late position. So I'm super excited about this. I'm going to be putting in a raise or a 3-bet depending on what these guys do. I still have a decent amount of big blinds, but obviously with this hand I'm not worried about going all in. So both of these guys fold, and here I'm putting in a raise, and for some reason I had a bad tendency this tournament of raising to 2.5 times the big blind when I was bluffing, and raising to 3 times the big blind when I had a good hand, which doesn't really make much sense. I should be betting the same amount each time, and everyone folds, so I take down the pot. Not great. I was hoping to see a flop. So the very next hand, we wake up with king jack suited. On my computer and internet, we're doing something really funky here. So my computer froze for a little bit before this hand. So I'm still thinking about how much I want to raise. I'm not a huge fan of king jack, but obviously it's a good hand. So I go ahead and click the raise button, but for some reason the internet lags out, and I just completely, like it folds for me, and I can't play the hand. So my computer lagged out for a solid couple hands, and I come back in the big blind with 5-3 offsuit, which isn't great. We're probably going to be folding to a bet here, maybe defending depending on what happens. But actually, this guy jams just 450 chips, and these two other guys fold. So it's only 250 chips to call for a pot of 750. So obviously the price is too good. I have to call. And here I'm actually not even that much of an underdog. It's just 33%, something like that. We lose the hand, but that was a fine call. So the next hand, we're in the small blind with 9-8 suited, which is a great defending hand. And actually the big blind's sitting out, which means for some reason he's not at his computer. So if this guy raises, it looks really suspicious. It just looks like he's trying to steal the big blind's blind because he's not there, and to steal my small blind. And I have a good hand to defend. So the guy on the button raises. My price to calls here is pretty good. Here I'm definitely going to call. I'm debating between calling and raising. But I go ahead and make the call because I don't want to make too risky of a play here. I think I definitely could have raised. This guy hasn't done this before, so I'm a little careful here. And so we flop, not terrible. We're just going to check it to the initial raiser just to see what he does. He goes ahead and puts out a really small bet of 400. Obviously, I'm not folding. I really don't want to raise it up here because I feel like I'd only get called by better. So here I'm really trying to put him on a range of hands. I don't think he's making this bet with a random hand that didn't connect unless he has like ace king, ace queen, one of those hands, but I feel like he'd shove those pre. He could easily have a 10 or a jack with a medium-sized card. He could have 2 pair here. He could also have a straight draw. Here I have a straight draw. I have a flush draw. I feel like he's trying to bully me. There's a lot of money in the pot, and I don't want to fold if the river bricks completely. So I'm going to go ahead and shove. It's only half pot anyway. I feel like he's calling pretty often, but I feel like I don't have much other choice. And if he has absolutely nothing, he is going to fold. So he actually calls with 10-9, so he was pretty dang ahead right there, but we kind of stuck out on him a little bit. We hit a 7 for the straight. So great result. I'm pretty happy with how we played that hand. A few hands later, we pick up 7s. This is a pretty good holding. I think I make a small mistake here. I decide to shove, and I think this is bad for a couple reasons. One, I don't think anyone's calling with a worse hand, like a smaller pocket pair. We're either going to be flipping or we're going to be behind to a bigger pocket pair. I also think, since I'm the aggressor here, they're more likely to fold, while if I just flatted or made a small raise, one of these guys could have shoved because they're pretty short. But since they're pretty tight, they're very likely to fold here to this aggressive play. So I think that was a small mistake there. But it's not terrible because we do pick up the blinds, so that's nice. So soon after, we're in the big blind. Two people are sitting out, which is kind of weird, but it means we're only five-handed. And it folds the player to our left, to our right, and we're not loving the situation at all because this is the player that's been. I haven't showed some of the hands, but he's been raising a ton when he's in late position or in the small blind to try to bully out the blinds. So we're not really sure what we'd do if he raised here because he's been doing it a lot. We kind of want to defend, but also we only have 12 big blinds, so that's not fantastic for us. But we're kind of lucky. He just calls, so we're happy to check this back, and we're gonna let him see what he does first. So this is not a great board. It's a very wet board though, so it's not a bad board to bluff. But I don't want to turn my head into a bluff just yet because I feel like he would definitely check a king or maybe even a queen. Here I think he's definitely betting a queen or a king or any flush draw. But he checks twice, which looks really weak. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in a pretty small bet, and just to see what he does. He doesn't have that many chips, so I feel like if he calls, we're just gonna give up and we're gonna fold if he bets. Or if he raises all in, we gotta fold. But he folds, which is kind of what we were hoping for, and we pick that up. All right, this is the next hand. We pick up a great hand, ace 8, and the big blind is sitting out, and the player to our right just raised. So we're in a great position. We're pretty sure this guy's trying to steal the blinds again, because I can't. Actually, I might be getting enough value to call with an okay hand, but I'm just gonna go ahead and shove, win those dead chips in the pot. And if he calls, he's most likely calling with a worse hand, because I doubt he's doing this kind of raise with that good of a hand. So the big blind can't do anything, so he automatically folds. Now we're waiting for this guy. He hasn't snap called yet, which probably means we're ahead. And yeah, he folds it, so we go ahead and get that pot. And literally the next hand, we're on the button with pocket threes, which is a fantastic situation. As you can see, the big blind right there is super short, so he's probably going all in. So we're going to wait. It folds to us. We don't have many options here. We're just going to raise it. It's not even that big. I think... Oh, wow. So I don't know what the big blind's doing. He obviously doesn't know like what he's doing because he always needs to call in that situation. It's always worth his money. There's so much in the pot. But he doesn't, so we go ahead and pick it up. And the next 2 hands later, we actually pick up pocket twos here. Everyone here is pretty short, except for the small blind. This is too good to do anything except shove. So that's what we're going to do. And yeah, he folds, and we're flipping against the guy in the big blind, and he actually gets us. So kind of funny. He was sitting out, and he wins that one. A few hands later, we're in the big blind, and we pick up 6-3 offsuit, which is obviously not great. But one of these guys is all in just from the ante, which is kind of ridiculous. And I don't know if the small blind realizes this, but we actually win money whether or not we win this flip. Because there's just a side pot for the guy because he gets the other guy because he had so few chips. So small blind made a big mistake there by not doing anything, and we win some money even though we lose. Kind of weird. I guess this is what happens when you play $1 tournaments. The next hand we're in the small blind. We pick up 6-5 offsuit. The big blind's still sitting out. He's losing a ton of money. I don't know if he had to go somewhere or something. So the small blind's the guy on the button's probably going to bully us. That's what he does. There's no real reason to raise here with a terrible hand. We can't fold. There's too much money in the pot. We might hit a flop, so we just go ahead and call. It's like 500 into a pot of 1,300. And we see an extremely dangerous board. We're just going to check it over. Even if he hit the flop at all, he's going to bet. And yeah, we're pretty much drawing dead to any king, ace, jack. There's some straight draws there. No reason to call. So this is a decent amount of hands later. So we've lost some money just to the ante. But now we're in the big blind with 7-5 off, and this player is aggressive. He's going to try to bully us. I don't think he's doing this with a very good hand. But this is for a large portion of our stack. We're getting a decent price to call. I decided to let it go. I think he's going to be doing this a lot, and I kind of want to shove when I actually get a good hand in that same situation. I'm kind of waiting for that. 5-7 off, I wasn't too thrilled to see a flop, especially if he keeps betting aggressively. I don't want to throw away my stack like that. Here he does the same thing. I go ahead and fold again. I'm going to let the big blind deal with that. Big blind shoves. Of course, yeah. So now we see what kind of stuff he's raising with. Jack 8 off. And he loses that, which we're kind of happy about. Hopefully it'll make him a little less aggressive. So we actually kept picking up a bunch of bad hands. We just got moved tables actually. We got walked once while on the big blind, so we took in that, but otherwise we've just been bleeding chips and antes, and we're down to just about 10 big blinds. So I'm looking to do something because my stack is really small. I'm going to try to bully this big blind just a little bit. Oh, never mind actually. I'm just going to call, try to see a flop. Flop's okay. I'm not looking to bluff into this guy. I don't know sort of how he plays. It's not a bad card to barrel. Straight draws get there. A jack that wouldn't have bet on the flop is definitely betting here on the turn. There's a flush draw. If he's got nothing, he might fold. Who knows? So we go to bed, and yeah, he folds. So we dig up that small pot. It ends up working out for us. So the hand right after, we pick up our first fantastic hand in a while, Ace King off, and still playing four-handed here. I'm definitely going to raise this up. Even if I take it down, it's not optimal necessarily, but we don't want to get see a flop that's really connected and low with Ace King. So we go ahead and raise it up. Small blind folds. We kind of hope this guy calls, but he folds. We still pick up the pot. So after that hand, I folded 7-5 off or something. Someone else went all in, and we got to the final table, where there were 9 of us. And I folded 3 times now in early and middle position with okay hands, like King 10 off, King 3 off, things like that. And we pick up our 4th King hand in a row. I think I could have argued for opening King 10, but that was in really early position, so I didn't really want to do that. Now we see an early raise, and I have King 8, which isn't terrible. We're all pretty short stacked because the big blind's 400 chips. I'm getting a decent price to call, so I go ahead and make the call. Flop is really interesting. We're not loving our situation here because the guy who raised often is raising with an ace. I have middle pair. That's pretty good. You could definitely argue to call here for that price, but for me that looks really value-y, and I just decided to let it go. So the next hand we pick up Ace 3 suited, which is definitely a good holding, especially in the small blind. If player 13 raises, we're going to shove on him. He doesn't. So I'm not sure what the right line here is. I decided to go all in, partially because Ace 3 doesn't play that great post flop. Obviously, if you hit an ace, we're good, but maybe we don't get called then if we go for value. If we get a 3, we're not necessarily good. We're pretty good in all-in situations against things like King Queen, King Jack that might call, but no call there, so that's pretty good. We picked that up. The next hand we pick up Pocket Kings, which is fantastic. Now we're just hoping someone shoves. The loosest shove would probably be player 13. He'd probably shove with the worst hand out of anyone, but if anyone else shoves, we're obviously never folding Pocket Kings. They'd probably be shoving some sort of small pair, maybe and any ace probably. Any ace, maybe ace 10 and above. We'd say ace 10 suited and above. So we see a shove, so we're super happy. We're obviously calling here, but we're just going to wait a little bit because if the next 2 players in the blinds, if they wake up with something like pocket jacks, pocket queens, maybe pocket 10s, they might call as well for a 3-way all-in. So we wait a little bit, but it looks like they're going to fold, and we're against ace 9 suited with our king. So we just got to dodge those 3 aces. And we do, so we hold. Now we're chip leader. So just a few hands later, we pick up pocket aces from under the gun, which is fantastic. I just wanted to say something about running good in tournaments, running well. But first, we're going to raise it up. I tried to make it 3 big blinds, but then I wanted to make it 2.5, and somehow my math just got messed up, and I raised it to 5 big blinds, which is way too big, and we're often not going to get callers. So that's a really unfortunate move for me. But I just want to say about running well. To win a tournament or to run deep like I'm doing in a tournament, you have to run well. And obviously, you're seeing this one tournament, but you're not seeing the other 10 that I played where I lost all of them. I cashed in 1, but where I ran really poorly, like I ran kings into ace 3 and lost, stuff like that. So we picked that up. So the next hand, we have 9-7 suited in the big blind. If the button or the small blind raises, we're definitely calling, maybe even raising over them just to see what happens. But actually, we have an open to 3 times the big blind from early position, which we're not super thrilled about, especially if one of these guys calls. We might have to fold, depends on the price. Here, our price is excellent. We're paying 1,000 chips into a 2,500 chip pot. We're going over and checking it over to him just to see what he's doing. It's a pretty wet board. If he checks back, I think I'm going to put in a small bet because there's a little bit of ICM here. There's 6 people left and the top 5 cash, and this guy's pretty short. So I'm thinking a bet here he'd often fold if he didn't hit the flop at all. Obviously, he's continuing with probably queen, a pair of queens, a pair of kings, maybe a set of fives even. Any jack continues because of that straight draw. So now the draw bricked, but all those are still good, and I'm not really feeling very confident. So I go ahead and check it over to him, and he shows us jacks. So I probably could have gotten it with a small bet at the end, but I didn't have the balls. In the next hand, we pick up ace jack suited, which is good. We're going to be pumping this up, probably raising to 1500. But we actually get shoved on, which is great. We're probably ahead of this. He's shoving 5 big blinds, so he's shoving any ace, any pocket pair. Hopefully we're not against a big pocket pair. That seems pretty unlikely in the situation. There's not much we can do if that happens. So the big blind looks like he was really considering it. I wonder what he had. But he ends up folding. And now we're against fours, so we're flipping. We're behind right now. And we hit an ace. And a jack that's not a club, so we don't have to chop it up. And we win that pot. Now we're officially in the money. The very next hand we get another ace jack, this time not suited. So we're obviously running extremely well. I guess you gotta get some run good to counteract the run bad that I've had in other tournaments. So we're gonna go ahead and raise it up. This is around 2.5x. I don't like this raise actually. I should definitely be raising more with the antes. There's just too good of a price to call for people in the blinds. But we actually get called by the player immediately to our left, which is kind of interesting. The small blind goes ahead and folds, and the big blind folds as well. And this is a pretty interesting flop. I'm the initial raiser, so I'm definitely representing better hands, I think. This hits my range better than his. I think I can definitely represent a king here. I'm also going to be betting a king very often. Sometimes I wouldn't bet a king, right, for value. But here there's a flush draw on the board and a potential straight draw depending on what he's calling with, maybe like 6-7 suited or something like that. So I just go ahead and put in a bet. I think he's going to be folding reasonably often, and that's what he does. So we go ahead and pick that up. So the next hand I pick up ace-3 suited in the big blind. So I don't think anyone could say that I'm running anything other than really well in terms of the cards I'm getting. But hey, what can you say? So the guy on the button raises, pretty standard I think. You could be raising relatively wide. I'm probably going to be, okay, so now there's another shove, and if there wasn't the initial raiser, I think I'd call, probably. But here there's just too much of a chance that my ace-3 is dominated by another ace, which would have been the case. So I guess I'm kind of glad that guy opened with king-queen. Just 2 hands later, we pick up pocket sixes, which is just a fantastic hand, can't complain at all. If it folds to us, we're probably going to be raising, maybe shoving. I don't think shoving is great because I don't think we get many callers. But the guy before us raised, so now there's so much dead money in the pot. This is a fantastically easy all-in because sixes don't play very well post-flop if you don't hit anything. I also think most of the people calling are not going to be calling with bigger pocket pairs. If they do, that's just unfortunate. So we're going to be flipping a lot of the time. I just wait a quick second just to hopefully induce a call behind. I think this guy has to call because there's just so much money in the pot. He's already put in 2,000. That's a third of his stack. He makes the call with ace-10, so we're flipping. And we win it with a flop. And we pick up the exact same hand again. Obviously, I'm thrilled. I almost can't believe it. I decided to shove because I'm shoving into 4 people. More likely to get a caller. I'm not really thrilled if I raise and just get called and see a bad flop. So I just go ahead and shove it. And we get another call, which is just, that's part of it's getting great cards, part of it's getting slightly better cards than someone else. And we win the flip, and now we're just overwhelming chip leader. We're 3-handed. The next bunch of hands actually aren't that interesting. We're 3-handed. There's not that much post-flop action because these guys are really short, and I'm an overwhelming chip leader, and I can kind of bully them. Here, obviously, I can't call. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip through all the hands where I raise and they both fold, which happens a lot. I think these guys just wanted a ladder, and they didn't realize that there's a decent pay jump at the top, and they didn't want to fight with me being the chip leader. They do make a bunch of shoves, but in this case, I can never call with that hand. It's just, I'd call pretty wide, but that's not one of the calls. And in retrospect, I actually think they were shoving pretty tightly. So I think it's good I didn't wake up with a medium type hand because I definitely could have lost the chip lead. I chose to fold here. I just wanted to balance out a little bit. I don't think it's a good fold, especially considering they've both raised previously, and I folded, so I might be representing a bigger hand. Here I pick up aces, which is kind of funny. He makes the call. Obviously, I'm going to be raising here. I don't really want to trap if there's a bad flop, and he folds. Here's an example of where I'm bullying the big blind. At least I think. Oh, I decided just to flat call. I think raising is probably better, but I assumed that he wouldn't raise. Just probably not a good call. So he shoves, I fold. This is a couple hands later. I skipped a bunch. I've been raising a lot on the button and in the small blind in order to bully. I haven't made many re-raises just because these guys are raising pretty tight, and I don't think there's a good reason to re-raise. I just call in those situations, but those haven't come up much. I made the raise. There's a lot of money in the pot. King 7 three-handed. I think I have to make the call here. We're not in great shape. We only have 3 outs. Now we picked up more outs on the flop, but we didn't get there. This is again a bunch of hands later. Yeah, I can't really call this. It's unfortunate I've been picking up bad hands when they shove. You haven't seen before. I pick up decent hands, and like this is one of them, and I raise and they fold. But let's see what happens on this one. I've been raising so much, I think they're like, okay, we have to take a stand. And that's why he shoves. I don't think it's a bad shove, necessarily. Especially with ace 6, I think he has to shove there. He just gets unlucky, he runs into kings. He doesn't hit the 3-outer, and we ladder, and we're heads up. King 9 heads up is a great hand. Never folding here. We're about 40% to win here, with 2 middle cards to 1 over and 1 undercard. But he holds. Again, it's a bunch of cards, hands later. You can see kind of the chip stacks varying a little bit. It's kind of like, I think he keeps losing chips, and we keep gaining some just from these type of raises. I also know he's a very passive player in this type of situation. Okay, I say this and then he shoves. I thought I raised and he folded, but that must have been another hand that I didn't include. Ace 7 heads up, great hand. He shoves. Obviously we call. And we hold. It wasn't a very eventful 3-handed and heads up game. I just kind of bullied these guys, ran pretty decently, picked up some good hands, and we end up winning this 27-person 3-table sit and go for just under $10 from our $1 buy-in. Thanks for watching, guys. This tournament was about a month ago, so I've gotten a little better. I've had a couple more tournaments, and maybe I'll be posting more poker videos, maybe not. But thanks for watching.